You have felt it before, that fire that rises before you can stop it. And part of you, even now, wonders if it will ever truly be under your control. Today, we are going to talk about anger. Not the anger you perform, not the anger you apologize for the next morning. The deep kind. The kind that lives just beneath the surface and waits. The samurai knew this anger very well. They trained in it, studied it, and eventually they learned to master it. And by the end of this video, so will you. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Heijo Shin. The mind of everyday calm. Before a single sword was drawn, before a single battle was entered, the samurai were taught something that most people never learn, that the state you carry into ordinary life is the state you will carry into crisis. Heijo Shin. The mind of everyday calm. It is not a technique you apply in the moment of rage. It is a quality you build every single day through how you move, how you breathe, how you eat, how you rest. The samurai understood this deeply. Anger was not the enemy. Unreadiness was. Miyamoto Musashi, arguably the greatest swordsman who ever lived, wrote about this in his most important work, The Book of Five Rings. He described the warrior's mind not as a tense, coiled weapon, but as still water, water that reflects everything clearly, disturbs nothing unnecessarily, and moves with perfect precision only when it must. Musashi fought over 60 duels in his lifetime and was never defeated. And those who studied him noted that even in the moments before a duel, he appeared almost bored, not careless, not reckless, simply undisturbed, because he had trained Heijo Shin into his bones. Think about the last time you got angry. Really think about it. Were you already tired, already stressed, already carrying something heavy from earlier in the week? Of course you were, because anger almost never strikes a rested, prepared, centered person with the same force it strikes someone already running on empty. The samurai knew this, so they trained the ordinary moments first. They swept their dojo floors with presence. They prepared their weapons with care. They ate without distraction. They slept with intention. Because every ordinary moment was a practice in the quality of mind they would need when things stopped being ordinary. You do not rise to the occasion, you fall to the level of your preparation. And Heijo Shin was that preparation. Chapter 2. Fudoshin. The Immovable Mind. Here is a question worth sitting with. What if anger was not the problem at all? Fudoshin. The immovable mind. This is one of the most misunderstood principles in all of Japanese warrior philosophy. People hear immovable and they think rigid, they think suppressed. They think of a man sitting very still with his jaw clenched and his fists tight, pretending nothing is wrong. That is not Fudoshin. That is just a different kind of suffering. True Fudoshin is not the absence of feeling, it is the refusal to be controlled by feeling. The samurai did not train themselves to stop feeling anger. They trained themselves so that when anger arrived, it could not move them off their center. Imagine a great tree in a storm. The branches bend, the leaves shake, the whole canopy moves with the wind. But the roots hold, the trunk holds. The tree is not pretending the storm is not happening. It is simply too grounded to be uprooted by it. That is Fudoshin. Musashi wrote that the primary enemy of the warrior was not the opponent in front of him. It was the chaos inside him. A warrior who could be made angry, he suggested, was a warrior who had already lost half the battle before it began. Because anger narrows vision, it speeds the body up and slows the mind down. It trades wisdom for heat. The Zen Buddhist tradition that heavily influenced samurai culture spoke of this as equanimity, a word that sounds gentle, but is in practice one of the hardest things a human being can develop. Not detachment, not coldness, simply the capacity to feel fully without being swept away. When something angers you today, the Fudoshin question is not how do I stop feeling this? The question is, can I feel this without letting it move me into a place I do not want to go? That is the difference, and it changes everything. Chapter 3. Zanshin. Remaining mind. You might think the most dangerous moment in a samurai's duel was the beginning, the first strike, the first exchange, but many masters believed the most dangerous moment was actually after the tension broke, after the body relaxed, after the fight seemed to be over. Zanshin, remaining mind, the awareness that does not switch off just because the obvious threat has passed. The samurai trained to stay alert, present and connected, not just in the heat of conflict, but in the quiet that follows. And this matters for anger in a way that most people never consider. Because think about what happens after an angry episode. The anger breaks, the confrontation passes, and you exhale, you apologize, or you walk away, or you simply move on. And for a moment, everything seems fine, but something remains. The body remembers, the nervous system is still activated, the mind is still carrying the heat even when the surface has cooled. And if you do not tend to that remaining energy with care, it does not dissolve, it compresses, it waits, and the next time something small happens, it has all of that old fuel behind it. This is why some people seem to explode over nothing. It is never about nothing. It is about everything that was never properly resolved. The samurai practiced Zanshin by staying present even after the action was complete, returning their weapons slowly and deliberately, bowing fully, not as a ritual, but as a way of bringing the mind back to rest with the same care it was brought to readiness. For you, Zanshin, after anger, might look like this. After the heat passes, do not simply move on. Sit with what just happened. Ask where it actually came from. Breathe through the residual tension in your chest. Let the body finish what it started, because you cannot resolve what you will not acknowledge, and you cannot dissolve what you rush past. Remaining mind means staying present long enough to actually complete the experience. Chapter 4. Mushin. No mind. Here is something that sounds like a contradiction. The warriors who became the most dangerous were the ones who stopped thinking so hard. Mushin. No mind. Or more accurately, the mind without clinging, without attachment to outcome, without the constant internal narration that most of us live inside every waking moment. Musashi spent years alone in the wilderness after his period of intense dueling. He went to mountains and forests and coastlines, not to escape life, but to understand it more completely. And what he found was that the mind, when left too much to its own devices, becomes its own worst enemy. We tell ourselves stories about why we are angry. We build cases. We rehearse arguments. We replay moments on a loop, adding detail, adding grievance, adding justification. And by the time we are done, the original wound, which may have been small, has been inflated into something enormous by the stories we wrapped around it. Mushin is the practice of returning to the moment before the story begins. Not to deny what happened, not to excuse what was done, but to meet reality as it actually is, rather than as your narrative about it has made it. Buddhist philosophy, which deeply shaped samurai training, taught that most suffering is not caused by events themselves. It is caused by the mind's reaction to events, and then its reaction to its own reaction. Anger happens, but the suffering of anger, the rumination, the shame, the replaying, that is constructed, and what is constructed can be deconstructed. Mushin does not ask you to be empty. It asks you to be present. Right here, just this. The breath moving in and out, the chair beneath you, the room around you. Not the argument from 3 days ago, not the fear about what might happen tomorrow, just this moment and your relationship with it. That is where anger loses its grip, not in the story, in the space before the story starts. Chapter 5. Shoshin. Beginner's mind. Pride keeps anger alive long after it has served its purpose. You have seen this, haven't you? A disagreement that could have been resolved in minutes, stretched into days or weeks or years, because no one involved was willing to consider that they might be wrong. Not because the issue itself was enormous, but because the ego made it enormous. Shoshin. Beginner's mind. This is a concept rooted in Zen Buddhism that was embraced deeply within samurai culture. It is the deliberate willingness to approach even familiar situations as if you are encountering them for the first time, with openness, with curiosity, without the hardness of "I already know how this goes." Musashi wrote in the ground chapter of the Book of Five Rings that the warrior must never stop learning, that the moment a man believes he has fully arrived, he has in fact begun to decline. Mastery, in the samurai tradition, was not a destination. It was a quality of engagement that had to be renewed every single day. And this applies to anger in a way that is both humbling and liberating. Most of our anger is defended by certainty. I know what they meant. I know what they think of me. I know exactly how this is going to go. And from that certainty comes the fire. But what if you did not actually know? What if the person who upset you was carrying something you could not see? What if the situation had more sides than the one you were standing on? Shoshin creates a small gap, just enough space to breathe before reacting, just enough openness to ask, what am I missing here? That one question can change everything, because anger defended by certainty becomes armor you cannot take off. But anger met with curiosity, met with even a sliver of beginner's mind, begins to soften at the edges, begins to reveal its actual shape, rather than the shape fear and pride have given it. You do not have to abandon your feelings. You just have to hold them a little more lightly. Beginner's mind is not a weakness. It takes extraordinary courage to say, I might be wrong about this. I might not have the full picture. That is not surrender. That is strength of a different and deeper kind. Chapter 6. Kokoro. Heart, mind and spirit as one. We have arrived at the deepest teaching. All of what came before, the everyday calm, the immovable mind, the remaining awareness, the no mind, the beginner's openness, they are not separate techniques. They are not a menu you choose from depending on the day. They are facets of one thing, Kokoro. The Japanese word, Kokoro, has no perfect English translation. It is sometimes rendered as heart, sometimes as mind, sometimes as spirit. But what it really describes is the integration of all three. The place where thinking and feeling and being are not separate rooms in a house, but one unified space. And this was ultimately what Musashi was pointing toward his entire life. He did not become a great warrior simply by training his technique, though his technique was extraordinary. He did not become undefeatable simply by being physically gifted, though he was undeniably skilled. He became what he became because he worked, relentlessly and with complete sincerity, on the quality of his inner world. Late in his life, Musashi wrote a short document called Dokkodo, The Way of Walking Alone, 21 Principles for Living, written just weeks before his death. What is striking about these principles is how little they have to do with swordsmanship. They are about desire and attachment and the quieting of ego and the acceptance of things as they are. One of his most often cited principles from the Dokkodo reads, do not let yourself be guided by the feeling of lust or love, not because emotion is the enemy, but because the unexamined emotion, the one you follow without question, without awareness, is the one that leads you somewhere you did not choose to go. Kokoro asks you to bring all of yourself to bear on the question of how you want to live. Not just your intellect, not just your willpower, not just your feelings, all of it, together, integrated, at peace with itself. Because the samurai who went into battle divided against himself, the one whose anger spoke louder than his wisdom, that man was already in danger before a single blow was struck. And the same is true for you, not in battle, but in the boardroom, in the bedroom, in the quiet conversation that goes wrong, in the car, in the moment someone says the thing that reaches directly into the wound. That is your battlefield. And Kokoro is the warrior you are being invited to become. There is a modern understanding emerging in neuroscience and psychology that deeply echoes these ancient principles. Research into the body's stress response system suggests that repeated, unresolved episodes of anger and emotional dysregulation can keep the nervous system in a state of chronic low-level activation. making future emotional spikes more likely, not less. In other words, the samurai were right. The ordinary moments matter. The daily practice matters. The inner world is not separate from the outer one. It never was. And so here we are. 6 teachings from the way of the warrior. 6 doors into the same room. Heijo Shin. The mind of everyday calm reminds you that who you are in the quiet moments is who you will be in the crisis. Fudoshin, the immovable mind, teaches you that you can feel the storm without becoming the storm. Zanshin, remaining mind, asks you not to rush past what has not yet been resolved, but to stay present long enough to let it complete. Mushin, no mind, offers you the space before the story begins, the breath before the reaction, the moment of pure presence that anger cannot survive inside. Shoshin, beginner's mind, gives you the courage to hold your certainty a little more loosely, and in that looseness, find a way through that your pride alone could never find. And Kokoro, heart, mind and spirit, as one, brings it all together, because none of these principles live in the head alone. They live in the whole of you, and they require the whole of you. Musashi walked away from his last duel and spent the rest of his life in a cave, painting, writing and sitting with what he had learned, not because the world had nothing left to offer him, but because he had finally become someone he trusted completely. That is the destination. Not the absence of anger, not the permanent suppression of everything you feel, but a self that anger passes through without burning down. A self that is, as Musashi himself might say, like still water, reflecting everything clearly, disturbed by nothing unnecessarily, moving with perfect precision only when it must. That is the samurai way, and it is yours if you choose to walk it. If this video reached something in you, please subscribe. There is more of this work here, and we are only just beginning. And I want to ask you one question. Leave it in the comments below. What does your anger most often try to protect? Think about that. And when you are ready, share it. You might be surprised how many people are carrying the same thing. Thank you for watching. See you next time. And as always, remember to stay in tune with your own mind frequency.